Hello everyone, welcome to another video on the channel, welcome to another GT Sport Daily Race C strategy guide. It's week 32 of 2021, we are heading to the Cathedral of Speed and we are taking some very high speed cars around the track as well. So it's Autodromo Nazionale Monza, it's Group 1 cars, it's 12 laps to get around, tyre wear at times 8, fuel at times 2, we just have the racing medium tyres available and everything else is as you would expect with BOP on, damage at none, a rolling start and slipstream at real. A very strange thing to say, but until I actually sat down to start this strategy guide I had never taken Group 1 cars around the Monza. So an original combination for Daily Race C this week, kudos where it is due to Polyphony Digital. They've actually been kind of giving us some fairly original combos in the last few weeks and this is one of them. Not the best settings because essentially there is no strategy with just those racing medium tyres available and a fairly long pit loss. Let's just take a look at that pit loss now and see why it eliminates any kind of strategy from the race. Into the pit lane we come at Monza in our Toyota TS050. Now the pit loss in Group 1 is generally a lot shorter than the likes of Group 3 and Group 4. Even so, when it's all said and done, you're still going to lose around about 16 seconds on the track, which you're simply never going to make up with a fresh set of tyres over a 20-minute race. So, no strategy for this one. It is very much like last week's race, Group 4 at Suzuka, where it's all about that tyre wear. We're on the medium tyres in Group 1 cars, tyre wear is at times 8. How bad is that tyre wear going to get on our Group 1 cars? So we join our Toyota TS050 on the last lap here of a 12 lap run. And you can see from the tyre wear indicators in the bottom left hand corner there's a fair amount of red showing there, particularly on the left hand side of the car. A lot of right hand corners at Suzuka, some corners like Curva Grande here and the two Lesmos, putting all that stress through the left hand tyre, so not surprisingly the left hand tyres are a little bit more worn towards the end of the race than the right hand side. Now as much as that tyre wear looks pretty bad on the screen here, you can see from the lap times that they have remained fairly stable throughout the course of the race. Sort of lapping in the kind of low to mid 1 minute 34s throughout. Fastest lap actually coming in at 1:34.146 on lap 8. And by lap 11 we're still only lapping a couple of tenths slower than that. So the balance of the fuel burning down, the tyres wearing out, and the fact that Group 1 cars just sort of generate more of their sort of grip from the downforce than pure tyre grip means that those lap times do manage to stay fairly stable. Now coming out of Lesmo number 1 there we did have a little bit of a moment, so it does sort of indicate that in those last couple of laps the tyre wear is going to become a factor. You definitely will start to feel the car struggle, particularly in the sort of two Lesmos, just with a little bit of understeer. Again, into Parabolica here you will feel that tyre wear just start to kind of creep into be a little bit more of an interference over the last couple of laps, but up until about lap 10, lap 11 the car does feel very stable and capable of churning out very consistent lap times. A little bit of a close up on our tyre wear at the end of the race here. You can see that it's the rear left that's doing the most work. As I said there on the video, mostly right hand corners at Monza, so it is the left hand tyres that do the most work. But that's it for the strategy. There isn't any pit strategy. Again, it's all about those tyres, and any tyre saving you can do in the early stages of the race should be able to see you reap the benefits over the last few laps. So let's move on to talking about cars in the Group 1 category, because Group 1 in Gran Turismo Sport is a little bit of a selection box. There is certainly, fair to say, there's categories within the categories, so I did want to test a number of cars for the video and give you my thoughts on them. It's a 5 lap test, we'll just see what kind of optimal lap time you get out of each car and their kind of top speed as well, because obviously top speed being fairly critical for Monza. First up we've got a Toyota TS050, which we did do the 5 lap run in, sorry the 12 lap run in. Its optimal lap by lap 5 is a 1:33.952 and its top speed down towards turn 1 of 191 miles an hour. Very stable, very capable, very nice Group 1 car to drive. Next up we've got the Audi R18, its optimal lap very similar to the Toyota, a 1:33.963. Its top speed coming in at 194. Does have more problems with the hybrid than the Toyota TS050, but it does have greater top speed. Seems to have a much better kind of grunt down the straights just through its conventional engine. But those optimal times very close. And finally, we've got the Porsche 919 out of the LMP1 hybrids. Its optimal lap of 134.028. Top speed 189 miles an hour. I did know the Porsche was the slowest of the sort of 3 usable LMP1 hybrids, and that is kind of confirmed by this little test here. But very, very close in terms of optimal lap time out of all 3 of the LMP1 hybrids that are usable. I keep saying usable because the Nissan is just not usable, and it's fair to say that PT have actually got those 3 cars very, very, very nicely bopped, and are all lapping within a tenth of a second of each other throughout my testing in terms of optimal lap. So that makes it kind of difficult for me to say which one is the best out of them. I think the Toyota is the easiest to drive out the 3 and the Audi is the hardest, but the Audi potentially could be the quickest if you can sort of use that hybrid. We did test the Toyota TS030. Very occasionally this car can throw a bit of a curveball and be quick, but it was a second off the pace in this test and definitely is out of the picture in my opinion. Next up we have the non-hybrid Peugeot 908, and as you can see it's actually set the quickest optimal lap of all the cars tested so far for 133.794. So it doesn't have the hybrid to power it out of the slow corners, but it is much quicker down the straights. Actually 14 miles an hour quicker than the TS050 down into turn number 1. So definitely a competitive car, but you can also see from the lap times it was lacking a little bit of consistency in my hands anyway. And finally, to represent the Group C cars, so that's the older Le Mans cars from the sort of late 80s, early 90s, we went into the Sauber C9 Mercedes. Its optimal lap wasn't quite as far off as I thought they might be for 134.6, so around or just under a second off the pace. Obviously very, very quick down the straights. It was the fastest of the cars we tested at 207 miles an hour at the 150 metre board, but it looks to me like the Group C cars, if you want to be competitive, are not quite there, being around about 1 second off the pace. So let's move on to that part of the video where we kind of relook at what we've already looked at in the video, reiterate a few facts and opinions, and talk about how I can see this race playing out. So in terms of strategy, of course there is no strategy. It's a no-stopper on the medium tyres, the racing medium tyres. Tyrewear at times it means those racing medium tyres will be a little bit tardy at the very end of the race, but not probably as bad as you might expect. There is no option though but to just endure that tyre wear. The 16-second pit loss means that there's just no point making a pit stop. And he's going to come nowhere near to making that time back even with the fresh rubber. Any kind of tyre saving you can do in the early stages of the race while you're maybe stuck in traffic should prove advantageous towards the end. The tyre wear is just enough even on the Group 1 cars, which tend to kind of generate most of their grip from the downforce rather than the tyres. There is still enough sort of loss of grip on the tyres towards the end of the race just to make it beneficial to look after your tyres where and when you can. Where this race does get a little bit more interesting though is in terms of car choice. So from what I can kind of surmise from my testing, and obviously I can't test every single Group 1 car out there, it looks to me like the modern day LMP1, so that's the Toyota TS050, the Porsche 919 and the Audi R18 are very competitive and all very close to each other in lap time. But the non-hybrid LMP1s like the Peugeot 908 and possibly the Audi R11, which I've not been able to test, and possibly the Tomahawk from Chevrolet, is it Chevrolet that's a Tomahawk? They look like they are also very competitive. The very fastest lap time we did of all the cars we tested actually came from the Peugeot 908, which is of course a non-hybrid LMP. So it will be fascinating to see how this plays out over the first few days of this race going live. What car proves to be the most competitive, what sort of car people tend to find themselves leaning towards. My plan for this week's race though is to try and do a live stream where we're going to feature every single Group 1 car from cockpit view in at least one race. So that should be good fun. Hopefully that's something you might be interested in. Do join me for those live streams if you can. However, let's move on to a lap guide of Monza in the Group 1 category. We're using the Audi R18 here. Into turn 1 we come, braking at the 150 metre board. Feels like you have to overturn the car to try and get these Group 1 cars round these tight corners. Felt like I was having to give the car a little bit more steering lock than maybe doing maybe something like Group 2 or Group 3. Through cover ground, we come down towards the second chicane, braking a little bit earlier than you maybe normally would in maybe a Group 3 or a Group 4 car. These cars are obviously carrying a lot more speed into these corners. Do give the chicane curbs and the second chicane curbs a little bit more respect than you might do it in a Group 3 car as well. Through the two levels we come now, the cars seem very, very understeery into these corners. In fact, you will see a lot of people running wide at both the Lesmo corners over the course of the week. Down towards the Ascari chicane we come now, again very similar braking point as to what you probably use in Group 3. Down into third gear we come. I like to keep the car in a slightly higher gear that you might feel comfortable, just to keep that balance as you go through that extremely fast and tricky chicane. And very crucial as well as it runs on to the last of the long straights down towards Parabolica. Now what you maybe want to be doing here is trying to play almost a game as how late can you brake, how close to the 50 metre board can you get in these hybrid LMP ones. In the non-hybrid LMP ones you want to be looking closer at the 100 metre board, but the kind of superior braking and sort of lesser top speed of the modern day LMP ones means you can brake closer to that 50 metre board than you might think, just trying to use that downforce to bring the car round. But that wraps up this race and strategy guide for week 32's daily race C. It's Group 1 at Monza. It should be quite interesting. It might be a little bit of a crazy race though. It is Monza after all. We're going to be arriving in a lot of these corners at a lot quicker speed than we have, so might be used to in Group 4, Group 3, and let's be honest, people have trouble finding their braking points even arriving at those corners in slower cars, so there could be a lot of carnage that may well ensue for this one. However, as I always say, make the most of it, have as much fun as you can. We will be live streaming this one quite a lot. We are going to try and get through all 21 cars in the category, so as I said, do join me for that if you can. All that's left to say is please do hit that like button, please do hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and if you like the content of course, why would you hit that like button? Otherwise, I've rabbled on enough here. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you on the next one. Goodbye now.